Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. And welcome to the Rector's Forum. We're glad that you're here. We are blessed today to have Andres with us to talk about the UVA tennis program and especially what it means to be a leader in that context. So I thought we would start off with just kind of a general question. How do you understand leadership, Andres? What does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. This is an honor, and it's always great to interact with people outside the program about leadership, and I learn as much from these talks as you all hopefully learn from me when I'm talking about the team. But the whole concept of leadership for me has been something that's evolved. I still consider myself a pretty young coach, and I'm pretty experienced, but I still feel like I'm a little bit of a rookie at this job. And leadership to me has turned into, if there's something wrong with me, there's going to be something wrong with the team. And so the greatest blessing of this job is that it's forced me to fine-tune myself every single day so that I can lead by example, but I can also be at my very best when the guys are going through tough times. And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And if I'm not sleeping right, or I'm having my glass of wine every night, or my beer every night, I'm just not as sharp. If I'm not exercising, if I'm not stepping into my church 10 minutes a day and just having some quiet time, things like that, I have found they're little drops of making sure that I'm the best that I can possibly be when my guys need me. And with 13 guys on the roster, there's always one guy going through something tough. And I can't even imagine being Lars Tiffany or Tony Elliott where they've got 30 guys on the team or 70 guys on the team. And so I feel like 13 guys is a lot of work, and I feel like I constantly have to fine-tune myself as a human being and a leader in order to do a great job for these student athletes.
So one key element of leadership then is making sure that you're in the best place that you can be and that you're leading by example. What sort of things does a leader need to do to guide and inspire and build up a tennis team? What sort of conversations do you have? What advice do you give? How do you frame things for me?
Well, I'm big on talking to my players kind of like this, on their same level. When they make mistakes, sometimes I need to talk like this to them, but I'm really big on making sure that they know I can get to here. And sometimes I'll even be here when I make a mistake and have to apologize. And I think apologizing to them when I do make a mistake only gives me credibility, and it improves the relationship. But number one, when we are talking like this, on an even level, that they know that I care about them as human beings, number one, and that I'm not looking at them like a point on the board or a way to get a bonus or a way to improve my career. It's got to be about them. And I use the term, and I got this from obviously the legend Tony Bennett. This is a service that we're providing. Without these kids, I don't have a job at a place that I love and a place that I think is magical. And it's about showing them that you care first about their life and them as human beings, and then you can start talking about tennis. Right. And then you can start talking about what they need to improve, because if you don't have the first part, then sure, you can make little differences in their tennis games and their ability to perform for the team, but you can take them way further if they know that you're truly there for them as human beings.
So if they trust you and believe in you, and they know that you have a relationship with them first and foremost, they'll follow you.
Yeah.
And I imagine that your experience as a tennis player too shapes their willingness to trust you. You've been through this, right? You've experienced it, and you can kind of draw from that. I was struck too by your comment about kind of humility. Maybe this is an overstatement, but you look out at the leaders, quote unquote, in our society, and there often isn't a lot of humility there, right? But it strikes me that what you're saying is that really the heart of effective leadership is humility, the willingness to be open, to be vulnerable, to admit your mistakes, and that's what gives you credibility in the eyes of your players.
You know what I give a lot of credit to is the culture of our coaches at Virginia. I mean, I walk into Tony Bennett's office, Steve Swanson's office, George Galmavach, Brian O'Connor is my neighbor. I mean, I go to Brian all the time, and these guys, they're humble leaders. So if the culture's like that, as a young coach coming in, you have to remember, I came in 2017, and it was my first year as a head coach. I had no idea what I was doing. And I inherited this monster that Brian Bolden built, and I didn't know what to do, but I was able to walk into the doors of these humble coaches, and they've been invaluable. So I think my style is a little bit of a reflection of the culture of the coaches. And I would put Carla Williams, at the top of that in terms of, she's at every single sporting event. She works like crazy. And so it's a culture at UVA that I think has benefited me. And I think, and that's how we want our student athletes to go on in the world. Is, with humility and hard work. And I think that's how you're going to get the most out of your career, out of your family, out of everything. So,
what are some of the challenges that you've had to lead the tennis team through?
I would probably, as a leader, probably eliminating my obsession with caring what people think, and specifically getting over the fact that my guys aren't going to like me all the time. So there are going to be honest conversations and tough conversations. And I think if you look at the last 2 years when we've won the national championship, we've been through a ton of adversity at the beginning of the season. And I had to have some honest conversations with the guys. And they didn't like me all the time, and that was very uncomfortable for me because I'm a bit of a pleaser, and I want everyone to like me all the time. And so it's been a really good experience for me, and that's part of the reason why I took this job. When I took this job, I knew that I would have to get over that, and I've come a long way. And I also challenge our captains to evolve in that way as well, because one of the things that I'm trying to do with our culture now to take it to another level, it's a great culture, but our final step is captains having honest conversations with teammates. And younger guys having honest conversations with captains if they're not leading in the right way. So many people I find have a really tough time having honest conversations in person. Everyone wants to send a text, everyone wants to post something on social media, but no one wants to either pick up the phone or grab a coffee and say, I'm sorry, or, hey, listen, I look up to you, and when you do this, I just don't, you're not setting the example for me. And those conversations, if you do it in a really respectable, polite, but honest way, they can go a long way. And that's what my team has done more in the last 2 years when we've gone through adversity. And I think it's the reason why at the end of the year, they're more battle tested and they're more evolved. And every national championship, and every coach will tell you this, once you get to that point, it stops becoming about how well you play the sport. Everyone's nervous, everyone's hurt, guys are sick, everyone's playing for the university, nobody can breathe, everyone's so nervous, and so it becomes about character, and it becomes about unity, and if you have honest conversations, you can get your team.
So character is built through practice, right? Through developing certain habits. And I'm hearing you say that, again, humility and openness and self-examination and kind of transparency are some of these core values that you're trying to instill. Do you have any particular practices that you engage in that enable the people on the tennis team to develop these practices, or for you to develop these values?
We have a lot of meals together. You'll probably see me at First Watch in Barracks Mall 3-4 times a week with the guy on the team. We have a lot of meals. At practice, it's a very competitive environment, and we compete a lot in practice. And so in the heat of the moment, when they're battling each other, I find that I don't really get across to them as well the points that I want to coach them with than if I invite them to breakfast or a coffee at Shenandoah Joe's or, Greenberry, and we sit down and they're emotionally relaxed and they've been able to sleep on what they did at practice or something, and we have a conversation. And so we have so many meals. And the other thing is we have a lot of team dinners at my house. And we have a lot of talks at my house as well, with my kids there and Erica, my wife, there, who, by the way, none of this would be possible if it wasn't for her role in this, because she gives me the opportunity to be fully dedicated at this job, and she does an incredible job at helping her raise our kids. But again, it's just honest conversation, it's open communication. My parents are Cuban, so I'm Latin. When there's a problem in our family, it comes out. there's no there's no eating it up and keeping it inside. It comes out, and that's how I run my team. And for some of these kids, it's foreign. For some of these kids in their households, there's a problem and they don't talk about it and they just internalize it. But I'm like, we need to talk about this, and I think it helps us evolve. And for some people, it's really uncomfortable, but you've got to talk to your wife, you've got to talk to your kids, you've got to talk to your bosses, and you just have to learn how to do it in a very respectful and polite way. And I think that's a huge theme in our program. And meals is the way we do it. The San Antonio Spurs basketball coach, Greg Popovich, talks about this a lot in his book, where he has his players over for dinner and opens up a bottle of wine, and he says that's where his best coaching takes place, and I can totally relate to that because we do that a lot.
That's great. Tell me a little bit about how your personal faith informs your work as a leader.
There's no way I would be able to do this job without my faith. There's just no way. I step into a church, I try to step into a church every single day for 10 minutes, because if I don't, I start believing that I'm in control of everything, and that's just not true. There's so many variables that I have no control over when running this team and raising kids. I mean, when my first child was born, I said, I'm responsible for this human being, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And the only reason why he survives is because he wants him to survive. And so I literally step into a church every day for 10 minutes and just pray and for wisdom and guidance, because I can't do it myself. I cannot do it myself. And so it's huge. And in my car, I give guys rides a decent amount, and I have a little rosary hanging from my mirror there, and guys will ask me about it, and it gives me an opportunity to kind of talk about how important it is for me. And we'll be in buses a lot, driving, and we have some deep talks in those bus rides. And guys at least once or twice a year will ask me about my faith, because they know that I am religious and I go to church, and they'll ask me about it. And to some of the guys it's pretty foreign, but I take advantage of those opportunities. I don't push it on them, but when they open the door, I definitely talk about it. And I just tell them, I say, I just don't know how you live in this world without believing in something that's bigger than yourself. I always tell them, guys, you got to believe in something, because one thing that I'm sure of is that you're not in control.
And when you embrace that realization that you're not in control, how does that shape you? How does that sort of direct you in your work? Like, what happens when you're able to accept that for you personally, and I guess for you as a leader?
It takes the pressure off. It takes the pressure off because you try and be as prepared as you possibly can for practice, for matches, for talks like these. But at the end of the day, things happen that are out of your control, and there are a lot of variables to everything that you do. And I just feel like the world is pushing us so far away from faith, and therefore you see so much mental health issues because because people think they're in control. And so when things go bad, they think it's their fault every single time. And when things go well, they think that they're special and they think that they did it. And maybe they did a lot of times, but there are some times where they didn't. And with these 2 championships, I mean, there was, a lot of people will call it luck, but I'll call it divine intervention. There were some things that happened that helped us, cross the finish line. And I'll share this. I remember the night before this last championship, I remember being in my hotel room, and the prayer that I would say at night was, God, if you think it's good for us to win, let it be. It would be so awesome, so fun. But if you don't think it's good for us to win, I'll take it on the chin and I'll trust you. But I really hope we win.
Well, and what you're describing, Andres, is really, it's kind of the heart of prayer. So sometimes I think we think of prayer as, we're asking for God for certain things. God, please do this for me, or, you're sitting there, please let me get an A on this test, or whatever. And the reality is that God is God, and God's will is eternal, and God's in control, as you're saying. And so really, real prayer is about aligning ourselves with the will of God. And when we do that, there's that kind of peace that you seem to be pointing to, right?
Yeah.
You don't get overly inflated by your successes, but you're also not completely beat down by your failures in life.
Because, and this happened to me. It's crazy the little miracles that happen to you if you pay attention. I'm in the parking lot of the McHugh building, and for some reason in my gut, I feel like I'm putting too much pressure on my guys. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, gosh, how do I take pressure off these guys? How do I make these guys understand that it's just a tennis match? I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking, literally in my car, in the parking lot of the McHugh building, and somebody knocks on my window, and it's this friend of mine who I talk about faith with all the time. I haven't seen him in a decent amount of time. He just shows up, knocks on my window, and I lower the window and I was like, hey, Connor, what's going on? And he's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm parked right next to you and I saw you here in deep thought. And I was like, yeah, I just feel like maybe I'm putting a little too much pressure on my guys. And we started talking about faith, and it was like God coming in, sending a messenger and saying, hey, you're gonna be okay, no matter what happens, you're doing the best you can for these guys. I'm here. And his main message to me was, he's a good God. So if you lose, it's because it's part of the plan. If you win, it's because it's part of the plan. And it's just little miracles like that. If you really pay close attention, they happen. But you've got to be paying close attention, and you got to be praying, and you got to be invested, because they happen. It's crazy, and a lot of times I don't want to believe it, but they happen. Yeah.
Well, and it's striking to me that you made time on a regular basis to kind of look around and notice things, right? And you make time for prayer. You make time to be attentive, to think through issues prayerfully. I can imagine, given the complexities and challenges of your role, that it would be very easy to be distracted by the little details, right? Mm-hmm. All the different details. Yeah, you only get 13 players, but still, there's a lot going on in their lives and in their tennis game. But you seem to step out of the fray sometimes, on a regular basis, I should say, and really center yourself. And that seems key to being a leader.
As I've gotten better at this job, maybe I've gotten better, maybe I've stayed the same and I just have incredible players, but as I've gotten better at this job, I've learned to do less. And I've learned to do less because I felt like I needed to call every alum when I was in the car. Every time I'm in the car, I gotta call an alum, I gotta call an alum, I gotta call an alum. And then it was constant and it was overwhelming, and then I just said, okay, you don't need to call an alum right now. You can walk into the chapel, which I love, and you can spend 15 minutes by yourself, or you can just walk the grounds. I do that sometimes. These are the little things that's so cool about UVA. You can be a coach here and walk the grounds. just walking down the lawn, it just gives you perspective. Walking around Charlottesville, just that you need time for yourself. I think that's been a big lesson for me. Exercise, like going running, I'm way better when I'm running, like way better. So you don't always have to be working. That's probably something that I've learned in this role.
Tell me a little bit about your vision for the tennis program. So we've talked about values here and kind of alluded probably to the mission too of the program, but what's your vision for the program? Paint a picture for me.
Preparing kids for life, but at the same time, bringing in the very best players that we can possibly bring in, because competing for national championships is so fun. It's so fun. I mean, it's just, there's a big difference between competing to make it to the round of 16 or quarters of the national championship, or, you know, it's just so fun. And being in an NCAA final, it's something that you just can't replicate in too many other things in life. And what these kids have to deal with, pressure-wise and expectation-wise, it's remarkable. And how they handle it, and how they're able to put the result aside and go out there and battle. And it takes years and years and years of building that culture. And that started a long time ago in this program. I mean, I give my predecessor a tremendous amount of credit, because when I took this job, I took a lot of what he did well and I ran with it, and then I added my little, you know, sprinkles to it. But it's about preparing kids for life and showing them that you can be a good person. You have to be a good person, because if you're not a good person and you're in that heat of the moment, the blemishes that you have in your life, things that you didn't do, things that you did negatively to other people, they show up in that moment. If you're not clean in your life outside the court, you're not going to play clean, and you're going to have self-doubt. And that's a big lesson to show these kids, is that however you are off the court is the way you're going to be on the court, and all the dots connect, and the same boxes you have to check off the court, you have to check on the court. And so just imagine the process of trying to win a national championship. They take that with them into the working world and their marriages, and it's just invaluable. So
one value I'm hearing too is persistence or grit, right? I mean, thinking especially about getting all the way to the championship and winning. And tennis is one of those games where things can seem to be going one way, and then depending on your perspective and your mood and how you're playing, it can switch quickly. How do you encourage persistence? Like, you know, let's say they're losing, but there's still a chance to turn things around. What do you do as a coach to like inspire them to keep going and recognize that they don't have to be winning every single moment to win the whole game?
Yeah, I try to explain to them on a daily basis that struggle is good for you. Adversity is good for you. You can't do anything special if you don't suffer. Like, you have to suffer. And you have to learn to appreciate it and cherish it and recognize it for what it is. And what it is it's fine-tuning you for what you're trying to achieve. And it just comes with a lot of challenges. And this is a daily conversation with their schoolwork, with their training. Something that we talk about a lot in practice is working mentally. There's a great YouTube clip about, you know, Rafa Nadal is being interviewed, and they say, how do you train mentally? And he said, by not complaining, by expecting, by understanding that you're not going to play well every day and continuing to work hard. And this is something that we talk about a lot in practice. It's way more important what my guys do when they're not hitting tennis balls on the tennis court than what they're doing when they're hitting tennis balls. And if you look at a tennis match, 15% of the match, you're hitting balls. The rest of the time, you're alone with your own thoughts, fully exposed in the arena, and how you handle that time when you're not hitting tennis balls is huge. And so the mental work is really important. And a lot of that mental work has to happen in practice. It happens during meals with the coaching staff. And then most importantly, and this is where I'm pushing my guys, it's in the conversations they have when they're having dinner together, when they're in the car together, when they're in their dorms together, when they're in their apartments together. And that's where I'm really trying to push this culture even higher.
Yeah.
So.
That's great. Well, let's open it up to the group and see what questions you have. Yes, Eric.
It seems like there are two things that have changed college sports, NIL and the transfer portal. How's that impacted tennis, and how's it impacted you as a coach?
It hasn't impacted me a tremendous amount yet, but it is 100% coming. And it's probably not my worry, because it's a challenge and it's something that I'm going to tackle. But right now, we're lucky enough to be in the position that we're in where players want to come here and just play for Virginia. Now, that might not be there all the time. I'm going to do everything I possibly can to keep that as a reality, but NIL is going to become a reality at Virginia. It has become a reality at other programs, for sure. NIL money is being distributed to top players and other programs all over the country. It's happening on a very small scale in our program, but it's going to become a big deal. And it's already become a huge deal in football. I mean, you can't survive without it in football or basketball or baseball. And so it's just a matter of time before it happens in tennis. The transfer portal is real. We have 2 transfers on our team this year. You have to be really careful with transfers. Typically, the transfer that I like to take is the transfer that's looking to come here because they really want a graduate degree from UVA. Not necessarily they want to transfer as an undergrad. I look at kids that want to come here because they want to get a great graduate degree here. And that's worked out well for me.
I imagine you have to be mindful too about their openness to the culture, which sounds very unique at UVA.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, the negative part of the transfer portal is that it's giving kids an opening to leave their university and their program if one little thing goes wrong. And I'm not sure what we're teaching these kids by allowing that. But some kids they do need to leave because they're in a toxic situation. But I would say a lot of them could probably stick it out a little longer and give it a little longer.
Other questions? Yes.
So first, thanks for being here and for all you're doing for the university and the players and the community. I was watching the live stream of the match last weekend, and to be honest, I was absolutely horrified when, after you made the overrule, which you absolutely should have done. I was so proud of you when you did that. But the commentators on the live stream and then the chat windows that came up after that were saying, you should have accepted the bad call. It was a very critical point in the game that you cost the team the match, which was absolutely not true. And then the chat goes on about how, things like, well, cheating is acceptable in sports and you should take advantage of it when you can. So a couple of things. One, is this really where things are going with college sports and with some of the avid fans that are in there? And how are you as a coach, other than setting a great example? Can the good coaches out there do something to help the kids and get away from this phenomenon?
Is that really true? Is that what they were saying? That I should have not overruled?
It was horrible. It was
Wow.
horrible.
I try not to read or listen to that stuff.
You just ruined his day.
Wipe it out of your mind.
Yeah.
What do you think about that perspective? Things like that one.
It's completely wrong. I can see how, it's tough because you've got these kids out there in these pressure situations, and we're the only sport where the kids are calling their lines. It's crazy. They're overwhelmed by the pressure. They're overwhelmed by their emotions, and then they're asked to call the lines when the ball's going 120 miles an hour. And it's not fair to them. This ball in particular was a really slow ball, and I thought it was going out, and I know my player thought it was going out, and it didn't go out, and he just called it out. It was like his instinct, and this is the most fair player on my team, by the way. And so it was just immediate, and I overruled it. And I did it, and it affected our guys for sure, because they were just in shock. Because unfortunately, you don't see that a lot in college tennis. But I just feel like some of us just need to step in there and start doing the right thing, because it is getting a little out of hand. But again, it's just because it's such a pressure cooker, and these kids are so overwhelmed, and they're asked to call lines, and it's not fair. It's like asking basketball players to call fouls. It wouldn't be fair. But listen, at Virginia, we're doing things right. I am 1000% sure that we're doing things right, and it starts at the top. And it's just a way that we're going to go about it. I feel like we've done NIL right. I feel like we do recruiting right. Compliance is they're not out to get us, but they're always available, and they always pick up on the first ring. And so Virginia is doing it unbelievably right. And I don't think I could do this job at a place where they're not doing it right, because I couldn't sleep at night. So just be rest assured that at Virginia, it's crystal clean.
Yes, Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm curious, tennis is such a mental game. You talked about meals and your faith, and I'm just curious if there's other mental health work or self-care work that you encourage with your team, because it is 85% not being adults.
We have some amazing sports psychologists within our athletic department, and our administrators, and with Carla Williams at the top, they've hired even more of them because of mental health issues, and they see it as a priority, which the coaching staff really values. And so we do have an incredible team, and there are plenty of my guys that go and see them, and they're not allowed to talk to us, the coaches, about what they talk about with the players, which I think is healthy. But they always have an open ear to a coach. If I want to call one of them and say, hey, just to give you my perspective, here's what I see. Hopefully this information is valuable to you as you're having these conversations with the student athlete. So that's at the forefront of player development and just the wellness of the student athletes at Virginia. So it's definitely there as a resource for them.
Yes, what are the questions we have? Yes.
Just a little light question. The kids all shave their heads or cut their hair. What caused that? Did you encourage it or discourage it?
Yeah, I think it's okay for me to share this, but we have a player on my team whose mother got diagnosed with breast cancer. And so the son decided to shave his head, and many of the guys decided to join him, which was a great sign of our culture. I was really proud of him. And so that's why it happened.
It was cute. I didn't realize it until I went to Washington tennis and went, ooh, what happened there?
Yeah.
Solidarity, yeah. What other questions do we have? No, I've seen other hands. Yes, Pam.
Well, I'm just curious, because obviously you're a competitive person, and I'm just curious how you internalize a loss, what you say to your players. It's probably just as hard on you as it is on your players. So how do you turn that around? And I guess that is kind of to the mental aspects as well.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I'm learning this, to give it time after a loss and not talk to them immediately after, because I always find that after watching the film, my interpretation of the match is very different from what my interpretation was just watching live. It's incredible, the difference. And it's just the emotions. It's the emotions. That's why the way Tony Bennett handles press conferences after losses, I mean, it's like an out-of-body experience. It's incredible. He has such good perspective, and it's just so huge for his team, because then if you have that type of composure, then your players are going to have it, and they're not going to see it as life and death. But Pam, I'm not great at it yet. I'm really not. I'm learning to get better at it, but I'm trying to give it more time after matches before I speak to my team. And before I blame them for anything, I blame myself. I do that a lot because I just feel like coaching is so easy if I'm just like, yeah, you could have done that better. Yeah, you could have done that better. When I can say, hey, if he's not doing it, it's because you're not doing a good enough job. And I think that's the hard way to coach. And so that's how I try and communicate it to them so that they know that I'm in the trenches with them. That this is not, they're not my little, dolls that I wind up and you go out there and you do what I say. But we're in the trenches together, I'm suffering with you, and we're in this together.
You're an actual team.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we lose, it's on me as much as it is you. And then if I do that, then they start doing that. They start taking accountability. Yeah.
Peggy, I think you had a question.
Yes, so when you recruit players, they're usually the stars from where they are, and then they come to your program and they might be number 12 or 13, but how you build those players really probably helps you for long-term success and team unity. So do you have any strategies that you use to help support those players?
Well, when they arrive, I make sure to bring them in my office and just talk to them about how tennis is a very self-absorbed sport. And you're encouraged to be selfish in our sport because it's just you out there and you're fully exposed every single time you go out there. You have no one to blame. It's all on you. And that the biggest lesson that they're going to learn when they show up to Virginia is the more you give to the team, the more the team's going to give back. And I say, guys, I know that sounds crazy and I know that sounds completely foreign to you because everything in your tennis career has been about you. But now, I promise you, if you go out there and practice with the guys and you make it about how can I give this guy the best practice, you're going to get so much better in return. And so I have a lot of those talks with them, and I just spend, and again, we have so many meals together, and I just spend so much time explaining to them, again, the more you give to the team, the more it'll give back. And in tennis, that's foreign. But it's the only venue that you can actually, or experience that you can actually have in tennis to learn that is college tennis. Davis Cup isn't even like that because it's 1 week out of the year now, at the end of the year, and so you don't really get to build that camaraderie. And so college tennis is the only way to really learn that. And if you learn that and become a pro, and you hire a coach, and you hire a physio, and you hire a mental skills specialist, and you see that as a team, I think that only helps your development as a pro.
It's very interesting. Yeah, Meg, I think you had a question.
Yeah. I know that a lot of your players at this point are so elite and they've been playing tennis for, hours and hours and hours, and their identity is tennis. And that's probably your identity also, but you have a family and a wife, and so it's probably easier for you to find value outside of the sport. How do you help your players, find that they have human value outside of being a tennis player?
You must play tennis.
I only ask because it was very hard for me, and I know that things are changing and that conversation is happening, but they're so elite, and I'm sure they find the loss as complete, dagger to their heart. So how do you help your players find their human life value outside of being an athlete?
That is at the core of what I address with my guys throughout their 4 years at UVA. It shows that you played an individual sport because it is at the core of individual sports. I'm really careful about what I tell my kids when they go out there and play sports. I have a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And I try not to tell them how talented they are, how great they hit the ball, or how great they kick the ball, or stuff like that. I make it more about how they cheered on the sidelines, or how hard they ran for the ball, or how good their attitude was. Because what happens in tennis is these kids grow up in the sport and they have people around them telling them how great they are. And how, you know what, you're gonna be a pro. Oh, we're gonna see you on TV. And they grow up thinking this, and then they end up telling their parents this, and their parents end up believing it. And then this what essentially is a lie continues to build upon itself year after year after year. And then when they realize that they're too small, or they have a technical flaw that's preventing them from playing at another level, or they don't have the resources, or they don't have this, then they come crashing down, and it's what most people in my sport end up experiencing. And so as a coach, I try and help them understand that how good of a student they are is just as important or even more important. How they treat their moms, how they treat their friends, how they treat their women in general, how they treat, their university, how they take care of themselves, how good of a teammate they are, that is actually even more important than their tennis career, so that they start to slowly shift their identity away from solely being a tennis player. Because again, so many people come crashing down. When I stopped playing tennis, my career high ranking was 270 in the world. I played one US Open, it lasted about half an hour. I got killed because I made way too big of a deal about it. And at 270 in the world, at 5'9", I couldn't break an egg. All I did was run and make people miserable because I just made balls. At 270 in the world, I felt like a failure. And I went through a really dark time, and I was working on Wall Street at the time, and I just wasn't taking care of myself, and I felt like a failure. At 270 in the world, you know how many people get to 270 in the world? Not many.
Not many.
Like, I mean, I got to play at a Grand Slam for half an hour, but I got to play at a Grand Slam, And my perspective was so off that I felt like a failure for so long. And so, as a coach, I try and convince guys that, hey, there's life after tennis, and it's way bigger, way more important. And yeah.
Well, it seems that you have an opportunity, a really great opportunity, to help a handful of folks each year find out some deeper meaning and purpose to life. Right? Because the general principle you're talking about here is that you're not defined by your status, whatever that might be, and whatever the context. And that's just a true message. It's a deeply religious Christian message as well. But it's a true message, but it's very countercultural, right? So it's not just in individual sports or in tennis, swimming. It's in our general culture here. It's the ethos of this particular area, especially, that your value and your worth is tied up in your status.
Yeah.
And that's just not true, And the more that we can say that and offer a different, more meaningful message to people, I think the better. So you're doing that in a very profound way, I think.
I try. Ever since we won these 2 titles, everyone wants to make me feel like I have this magic and I have this secret sauce to win national championships. And a big lesson for me has been the more successful you become, actually the harder it becomes to stay grounded, because everyone's telling you how good you are and how incredible you are. And I'm the only one that knows that, hey, we were an inch away from losing to Kentucky in the quarterfinals last year. And if we lose to Kentucky, none of this is happening.
Right.
And it's an inch. Right. The wind could have blown to the east for that half a second.
And then you wouldn't have all these people surrounding you.
Maybe I would be here. That's what it is. Now, I'd like to think the more prepared you are and the better your culture is, that wind blows in your favor sometimes. But I think it does become harder the more you win at anything, to just keep your perspective and say, hey, this is not all you. Don't think that you're this genius.
Well, Andres, thank you so much for being with us today. Let's give him a round of applause. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.